As you might tell from my shirt, this show is about heavy metal. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we're going to talk about some heavy metal music. I got excited when we were doing the horror and metal tag from my buddy Hellhound over at the Horror Metal channel. So I got inspired, so I thought I'm going to do my top 10 heavy metal bands of all time, baby. So these are all going to be straight up heavy metal bands. There's no glam metal in there. There's no alternative metal in there. There's no bands that were originally hard rock that maybe have influenced heavy metal, like Led Zeppelin. This is all straight up metal bands, all the way. So I'm going to start off with a few honorable mentions. This band I really wanted to put on there, Faith No More. I really love Faith No More, but that goes into the more alternative metal category. They're not straight out metal. So yeah, it pained me not to put them on there. And I just want to mention this really cool band that I recently fell in love with, and that is The Sword. And definitely one of the most awesome metal bands, but they're kind of hardcore too. They're a mix of hardcore and heavy metal, and that is Hatebreed. Awesome, awesome band. A band that I've got into so much since the day they came out, since they first came out, I've been obsessed with them, and that is Kill Switch Engage. Absolutely love them. Yeah, it's hard not putting some of these bands on that list. And here's another one, Meshuggah. Another awesome band. And of course, Ozzy Osbourne. So we won't have solo Ozzy Osbourne on the top 10. Alright, let's get to it, shall we? To the nitty gritty, and that is... oh shit, Carcass. Hell freaking yeah. I think that's the way it's supposed to go, actually. I love Carcass. I think yes, they are death metal, but death metal counts in this in this category. It's metal, and in my opinion, the best death metal band of all time, and one of the greatest heavy metal bands, period. When I first heard them, it was the Heartwork, when Heartwork first came out, and I tested it, because a while back, Blockbuster Music, you used to be able to listen to CDs before you bought them, which I thought was so awesome. And I turned on the Heartwork album, and oh my god, I was completely blown away. I thought my ears were going to pop out, It was so awesome. The absolutely punishing riffs of Carcass are unmatched by any band, in my opinion. Just absolutely monstrous heavy metal riffs. And yeah, along with the other typical death metal type drums and vocals. But what sets them apart for me is not only the musicianship. A lot of their music tends to be towards incorporating like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest style guitar work. It's very technical, and it's very, very proficient. And on top of absolutely thunderous heavy metal riffs. That's what sets Carcass apart from any of the other death metal bands, in my opinion. Next up is the mighty Anthrax. Oh yes, one of the greatest thrash bands of all time, no question. A lot of people say that Exodus should be in that spot in the top, the big four, the big four including Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax. A lot of people think that Exodus should be there. But Exodus never rose to the heights of fame that Anthrax did, so that's why I feel. They were kind of mainstream at one time. Especially with the Among the Living album, which I think is an absolute thrash classic. Every song on that album is fantastic. I love Spreading the Disease. I love State of Euphoria. And even their first album, Fistful of Metal, was really good. So yeah, just an awesome band. If you've ever had the chance to see them live, they absolutely destroy the place. Even nowadays, to this day, they kick serious ass. Next up, Queensryche. That's right, Queensryche, baby. I absolutely freaking love Queensryche. And they are the creators of my favorite metal album of all time, and that is Operation Mindcrime. What an incredible album that I can sing every lyric to. I bang my head, I sing every lyric, and I lose my voice trying to sing like Jeff Tate, because Jeff Tate is also my favorite vocalist in heavy metal. So Queensryche is just absolutely amazing. Yeah, they started out being like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest style, except they're American. But they had progressed throughout their career into a more progressive type of heavy metal. Incorporating like stories, like Operation Mindcrime is obviously a concept album. But yeah, the music became progressive metal, and I really, really enjoy it. That's where they found their niche, and that's what they're best at. So yeah, Queensryche. Next up, Judas Priest. You gotta love the immortal Rob Halford on vocals, one of the greatest vocals in metal history, no question. He has an amazing range, extremely powerful vocalist, and Glenn Tipton and KK Downing are one of the best duets in guitar in metal, for sure. All kinds of classics, just an amazing band, and they're certainly one of the forefathers of modern heavy metal. And they certainly created the look, the image of heavy metal, I would say, with the studs and the spikes and the leather, and they brought that image to metal, and the motorcycles. So you'd see Rob Halford come out on his motorcycle sometime. Yeah, they brought that to metal, definitely, and that's become an iconic look for heavy metal. Everyone wears the leather jackets, spikes and shit, nose rings and chains and all that stuff. So that's why Judas Priest is up there on the top 10, definitely. And next up, it's Pantera, baby. Yes. Awesome, awesome band that I feel kept metal alive in the 90s. If it wasn't for Pantera in the 90s, metal might have died, They kept heavy metal alive. Yeah, you still had those older bands around. You had Metallica around, but they kind of abandoned heavy metal. They went for the more commercial style of rock. And you had Slayer still around. You had Exodus, some of those older thrash bands, but they were doing the same kind of thing. They weren't breaking any new ground at that time. So here you had a band that just came out of nowhere with a completely new sound, a completely new style. It's thunderous, it's in your face, it's got groove, it's incredibly heavy. You had an awesome vocalist with snarling vocals that gets right in your face and tells you like it is. And that's what I love about Pantera. And you had one of the greatest all-time guitarists in, of course, Dimebag Darrell, the late Dimebag Darrell, and of course now, unfortunately, the late Vinnie Paul, who's one of the greatest thrash metal drummers of all time. Next up, of course, you have to put Iron Maiden on the list. No top 10 list of metal could ever be complete without this band right here. Iron Maiden is just incredible. Incredibly technical band, very technically proficient, I would say. Just amazing operatic vocals by Bruce Dickinson is just awesome, and they bring that iconic devilish imagery to metal as well with the Eddie character, and like songs like The Number of the Beast. They incorporated that evil element into metal, which bands like Slayer and Venom really ran with, And so they brought that. They brought the imagery into heavy metal, like the sick-ass album covers, like Number of the Beast, of course. They brought those awesome album covers to metal, too, which heavy metal is really known for, having those really sick album covers, and gory, and nasty, and horror-themed a lot of times. That's why I love horror and heavy metal. They go hand in hand for me. So next up, Megadeth, baby. Oh yeah, I love Dave Mustaine and company. And this right here features my favorite metal song, period. And that is Hangar 18. That song is just absolutely amazing. Anytime I hear that song, I get so hyped. I want to throw shit everywhere. I want to lose my mind when I hear that song. Especially when they do the dueling guitar solos towards the end. I just feel like no song has such a build-up to like an incredible crescendo at the end, you know. It just, the whole song, it just builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, and then by the end they're absolutely trading blazing-ass guitar solos. Amazing. It's just, it gets me so hyped. It's incredible. So Megadeth, of course, is amazing. One of the greatest thrash metal bands of all time. Certainly one of my favorites of the big four of thrash metal. And yeah, of course, Dave Mustaine is a very controversial front man. You know, he's always out there talking shit and speaking his mind. Dave Mustaine is never afraid to speak his mind. And I admire that a lot about him sometimes. You know, sometimes he goes a little bit overboard, but a lot of times he's right, you know. And I agree with a lot of the things he says sometimes. He's not always right, but I'd say 90% of the time he is, you know. And he's a highly intelligent guy. So next up, I had a real hard time between Megadeth and this next band. You probably know what I mean. And that is Metallica. Of course, you have the iconic Master of Puppets there, which is absolutely incredible album. So, I don't know if you guys noticed this poster back here. This is actually signed by all 4 members of Metallica. How about that? And this was done during the Black Album era when they had Jason Newsted, back when they made the Black Album. And they still had the long hair and everything, you know, they're still like hippies. And that's when I actually met them at a signing they did in New York City at Sam Goody Record Store. I believe it was the grand opening of Sam Goody, I'm not sure, but yeah, it was awesome, it was awesome. And it was so cool to meet them. They just seemed like really cool, down-to-earth guys. And back at that time, I was completely starstruck because I was a massive, massive Metallica fan at that time. I still am, but, you know, over the years I felt like they kind of abandoned heavy metal a little bit and they went for the more commercialized stuff. If it wasn't for that, they would be higher on this list. But still, they made 4 absolutely incredible heavy metal albums. There's no question about that. Next up, you have the iconic Black Sabbath. Hell yeah. Now, sure, you want to include Dio on that? Fine. I like some of the stuff from the Dio years. I like The Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell. But for me, the real Black Sabbath lineup is featuring Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness. And of course, Tony Iommi has created some of the greatest all-time heavy metal riffs. And of course, Black Sabbath is what I consider to be, I know it's kind of arguable, but I consider Black Sabbath to be the first ever full-blown heavy metal band. Yeah, there's other bands that might have had heavy metal songs, but I feel like Black Sabbath was the first full-blown heavy metal band. They were just metal all the way. They had the absolutely thundering riffs from Tony Iommi, and those screeching, high-pitched, devilish vocals from Ozzy Osbourne. And back then, he sounded extremely, like, evil, you know. That's one of the things I love about Black Sabbath. Listen to a song like Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. You know, it sounds so menacing, so evil, and his voice goes right through your brain, you know. Say what you will about Ozzy, but when it comes to metal, he's one of the most legendary voices of heavy metal, no question about it. So, there we have one band left. Who's number 1? It's this band right here. This poster is signed by Kerry King as well. And that is The mighty Slayer. Hell yeah. Fucking Slayer! The greatest heavy metal band of all time, in my opinion. Slayer, to me, represents everything that heavy metal is all about. Nobody does it better than Slayer. You got pounding drum, double bass drums. You got dueling guitar work. You got blazing solos from Jeff Hanneman and Kerry King, both equally awesome. You got evil sounding music. You got evil lyrics. You got lyrics about war and necrophilia and murder, death, serial killers. You got incredibly dark ass lyrics. You got incredibly evil, menacing vocals from Tom Araya, who many call the voice of hell. And you have so many incredible albums. Those first, 5 albums, I say, are some of the greatest metal ever produced. Nobody has matched that as far as several albums back-to-back like Slayer has. You know, they started with Show No Mercy, which was awesome. Then they had the EP Haunting the Chapel, which is awesome. You had Hell Awaits, which is absolutely awesome, and to me, Hell Awaits is where they really found their calling. It sounds so freaking raw, so freaking evil, and incredible. It's just amazing. And then, of course, Rain and Blood, they just shattered the earth with that album. It's absolutely incredible. Many people consider that the masterpiece of thrash that there's. And I can't argue with that. Rain and Blood. You play Rain and Blood anywhere, people lose their freaking minds. Slayer could just play a concert and just do Rain and Blood and leave, and it's only 25 minutes long or so. And everyone would be sweating their ass off from being in a mosh pit and crowd surfing. They have blood running down their faces and bruises and Slayer live show is incredibly violent. It's incredibly intense. The best live band ever in heavy metal to me, with some of the greatest albums ever in heavy metal. The music is just amazing. The songs are so well written by guys like Jeff Hanneman, Kerry King, and Tom Araya. But to me, this guy right here, Jeff Hanneman, to me wrote the best Slayer songs, the most intense, the most thought-provoking, and the most incredible songwriter to me in Slayer is Jeff Hanneman. So rest in peace, Jeff Hanneman, and thank you guys so much for joining me in the top 10 heavy metal bands of all time. So rock on, keep it metal forever. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Keep it evil. Tune in and stay scared.